They've brought in Brandon Cooks. They re-upped Todd Gurley. They gave Aaron Donald a monster deal. Again, what we talk about when you don't have that quarterback that's taking $33 million of your cap, like we just saw Aaron Rodgers get last week, it gives you a lot of room to build your roster and put a lot of these big name players in place at key positions. So, Eric, Vegas has them as the leader winning this division. Obviously, they want more than just the division win. They want to win some playoff games, which they didn't do last year. Again, a lot of hype around this team. They got that home playoff game, but they lost it. Jared Goff made the jump last year from what we kind of talked about on last year's preview with the Rams. Was he capable of making that type of progression? He did that, but he still wasn't able to get a playoff win. So this team, obviously the money they're spending, the expectations are they're going to be challenging for a Super Bowl. Is Goff capable of leading this team to that Super Bowl, though?
Look, I don't know if it's all about Jared Goff getting them to the Super Bowl, but did he make an incredible progression last year? Absolutely, and more so than I ever thought he would. Now, Justin, I have a thought on the Los Angeles Rams, and I'm going to need you to tell me if I'm absolutely crazy, which you probably will, or if maybe you kind of see where I'm going with this. Now, bear with me for just a second.
Oh, boy.
I see the Los Angeles Rams a little bit the way that the Golden State Warriors were 5 and 6 years ago. Now, in the NFL, it's very, very hard to win multiple Super Bowls in a short period of time. So I'm not saying that the Rams are then going to go out and win 3 of the next 4 Super Bowls like the Golden State Warriors just won 3 of the last 4 championships. That's not really what I'm saying. But you're taking a team that had for years and years and years been relatively untalked about, except for the Kurt Warner time, and similar to the Golden State Warriors, and now all of a sudden they've done so many things right from an organizational perspective. You've got a bump in the road with their loss last year to get, out of the playoffs a lot earlier than people thought. And instead of resting on their laurels, they go out and they make a ton of moves. And they just come back, I think, stronger the following year. And so even though they lost in the playoffs, that might be the best thing that could have possibly happened for this young quarterback, this young running back, this young team. The commitment that they made to a guy like Cooks, that could be a monstrous connection. I think Cooper Kupp makes a bigger progression this year. I think they've got weapons. I think Todd Gurley, if he's healthy, is one of the best running backs in the league. I just think they have a lot of pieces. Then they got better on defense. They've got a young head coach. This reminds me of a Golden State team that just all of a sudden realized, hey, we're not the laughingstock of the NBA anymore. And now the Rams. More people go to the Rams games than the Chargers games in LA. This is not the laughingstock of LA anymore. And so I think their culture has completely shifted in Los Angeles for these Rams. And I think they're ready now with that playoff loss last year to say, you know what? We're going to go and we're going to take this NFC West by storm. There is nobody in these other 3 teams that are going to beat us for this division. We are absolutely 100% going to the playoffs again. And this year we're on a mission. Maybe not to win the Super Bowl, although that's always going to be your goal when you're one of the top teams in the NFL. Even if they don't, I think they get a lot closer. And then the next year they come back even stronger still. I think this team has positioned themselves to make a good run for the next 3 to 5 years in the NFL. So, Justin, tell me, am I crazy?
No, not at all. I completely agree with that. And look, you're right. They definitely made a cultural change for this Rams team. That the talk was, they're playing in the Coliseum. It looks like there's 15,000 people in there, and it just looked awful. And the optics of it looked bad. Goff was struggling, and he did not look good that first year. And then all of a sudden, they start winning games and they start looking better, and everybody likes a winner and everybody likes to be sort of on that ground floor of a winner. And that's probably what that LA market feels like. And you're talking about the second biggest media market in the US. So it makes it a destination, just like we see with the Lakers. And really right now, the Rams are sort of the Lakers and the Chargers are sort of the Clippers. They're the team that really, they're not really getting any buzz about them. They're not really a destination type team. And now you've got this massive stadium that they're going to be opening in a few years whenever that project gets done. So, yeah, I buy into that. And again, like we talked about, Goff, he's only into his 3rd year. So you have this year, you have year 4 of his contract, and then they'll be able to sign him for the 5th year. Again, just like we talked about with some of these other teams where you draft a quarterback in the first round or he's on a rookie deal and you get those years where he's not commanding 15, 17% of your cap, that makes a huge difference. So this is the time that the Rams could do some damage, because the biggest difference between the NFL and the NBA is that hard cap. And when these salaries come around, it's not like what Golden State can do when they can finagle things and just say, okay, we'll just keep paying everybody and just pay a ton of luxury tax money. The NFL, you can't do that. You have to be at that number or under it. So that's what hurts these teams, and the ability to just keep on and on winning, unless you have a player like Tom Brady that's willing to sacrifice and take way less than market value. So the Rams are in a good position. They have a lot of good talent around them, but when you have guys like Marcus Peters that'll come up for a deal and things like that, where's that money going to come from? How are they going to continue to pay these guys? That's some of the questions they'll have. But the reason I brought it up with Goff was he played very well last year, but in that playoff game, he was only 24 for 45. That's 53%, only one TD, took 3 sacks. It just feels like if they get to the playoffs, very similar to what you talked about with the Eagles last year. They had such a deep team, but it still took Foles playing some phenomenal football to get them over the hump. That's where the question with Goff comes in. I think we like him in the regular season. It's just, can he continue that into the playoffs? Can the Rams put together a game plan that sort of allows him not to have to throw the ball 45 times in a game that was only 20-13 that Atlanta won? It wasn't like it was a high-scoring game where they were way behind. They probably just threw the ball a little bit too much and put too much on him that game. But the number Vegas has set on the Rams here, Eric, as we close out this NFL preview with our last team, Vegas has the Rams over under 10.5 based on what you said. I think I know where you're going with this one.
Wow. But see, that's a tough one, 10.5, because 11 is, it's not that I don't think they can get to 11. And I think I'm still going to take the over on this, but I want to say that there's an exact reason why I'm going to take the over, but it's not because I think the Rams are just going to blow everybody out. I think it's the benefit of the fact that, check this out, they do have to play Minnesota, Green Bay, Kansas City, Philadelphia, and the Los Angeles Chargers, but guess what? The Rams get all of those games at home. So that's a big benefit for the Los Angeles Rams. That puts some of the easier games out of those other conferences away for them, but they're away games that are very winnable. So that's how I get myself to the 11. But again, Vegas at 10.5, it's a growing season for the Rams. And so even though I'm very high on them in this division, I'm very high on their direction as a team. Like I said, 3 to 5 years, if I'm putting a business plan together, I love where this team is going. But I can't just anoint them right now just because of last year's success. I think you've got to be careful that, we're not taking a team like, remember Carolina a few years back, and all of a sudden it was like, oh, is Carolina just going to be perennially here until Cam Newton wins a Super Bowl? And then you've seen them struggle since then. So be careful on the Rams, but with their schedule, I like the way that it's set up, and I think if they all stay healthy, it gets me to that over. But look, I'm not talking 14-2 over type of thing. I'm talking, can they get to 11-5? Sure, I think they can.
Yeah, I'm right there with you. I think 11-5 is probably where their ceiling is going to be, just because there's so much depth in that NFC. And even thinking about it, the previews we did and doing them the way that we did, there were some teams maybe now trying to go back and fix, because either there's going to be a lot of wins in the top and not a lot in the lower. They're going to really beat up on these AFC teams, or there's going to be injuries that are, obviously those things will happen. But some teams, I think that there's a lot of hype on when you hear a lot of people way up on Dallas and even the Giants and what's going to happen with the 49ers. I don't see how, unless there's injuries, that those teams are going to be able to make a playoff run. There's just so much depth in this NFC. So I think that does limit the Rams some. But again, you touched on it. When you line up and you look out and you've got Brandon Cooks and you've got Robert Woods and you've got Cooper Kupp, and you turn around and you've got Todd Gurley in the backfield. And we talked about how much talent is on the defensive side of the football for them and what Wade Phillips can do with that talent. It's kind of scary to think about. So I would feel very comfortable with them, Eric, going over that number at 10.5. I think they'll be right in that 11, maybe upper to be able to get to 12. I feel comfortable, though, thinking they can go 11-5. Let me ask you a bonus question before we end this. Do you think in the NFC we could see a 10-win team on the outside looking in? when the playoffs are set after week 17?
Wow, that's a great question, because I do think it's possible. Now that we have the opportunity to go back and listen to all of our episodes over the last 4-week period, I'm sure if everyone added up all the wins and losses that came out of my mouth, it's not going to add up, because too many teams are at the over and not enough teams are at the under. But that's because we're kind of
right. Like these two morons can't do math for anything.
No, and I get that, but it's because there's a 4-week period there. There's injuries that have happened since then and things that have changed even since 3 or 4 weeks ago. But I think the general sense is we feel strong about certain divisions, not as strong about other divisions. And then there's some bottom feeders that we feel very confident are going to get beat often, no matter which division is playing them. So in the NFC, I do feel that it is possible, because we're talking about a team like the Rams, a couple teams like, Green Bay and Minnesota, a couple teams like Atlanta, New Orleans, and Carolina, and then the Eagles, and then potentially, depending on what the Giants and Cowboys do, I feel like there could be 7 teams at 10 wins. But again, I would have to go through and really reconcile all of their schedules to see if that's even possible. That was the point I was getting at with the whole math thing. But if we sat down and we did our over-unders by taking every team's schedule and doing it based on the strength of the teams and just without looking at the numbers at all, I say that there are definitely 7 or 8 teams capable of 10-win seasons in the NFC. And I think that's more of the point of your question.
Yeah, there's just so much depth when you just take a look. I just think back about some of those divisions and who we think is going to be sort of 8-8 and above. That's where you start to think about who can make a playoff run and who can sort of position themselves. And I really think that limits teams in like the NFC East, where, we're talking about them flirting around 8-8. I don't think those teams are going to have a shot, because I think the number is going to be set a lot higher when you look at the talent. And again, we're talking about this prior to injuries. We don't know what's going to happen when the season kicks off and how it progresses, but it's always fun to speculate those sort of things. A big point of speculation, Eric, as we sit here to close out episode 215, was what in the world the Raiders were doing with Khalil Mack. We touched on it a little bit when we talked about the Raiders several weeks ago when we did the AFC West. There's a lot of questions with Khalil Mack. Do the Raiders want to pay that kind of contract? Are they going to trade him? There was rumors that the Jets wanted him, the Packers wanted him. But last Saturday, all of a sudden it broke that the Chicago Bears not only were interested, but they had an agreement in place and they were negotiating a long-term deal. The asking price had been rumored to be 2 first-round picks. Well, that's exactly what the Oakland Raiders got. They will take the Bears' first-round picks from 2019 and 2020 in exchange for All-Pro Khalil Mack. And then the Bears went out and they signed him to a mammoth contract, $90 million guaranteed over $141 million total. But that money gets a little fuzzy, but that $90 million is a huge, huge number. Aaron Donald probably wishes he had waited a few days to sign his deal, because he got surpassed within hours, it felt like. So, Eric, this is a deal that's been talked about. Did the Raiders screw up trading Mack? Did the Bears overpay? Did the Raiders make the right move, giving themselves salary cap relief to fix some of the other holes that they had? Is this a move that puts the Bears ahead of schedule? So who got this deal right? Was it the Raiders or was it the Bears?
I think you'll be surprised by my answer, but it's because of how the details of this all worked out. I think the Raiders actually got the better of the deal. And I think you're going to be surprised with why I think that. And it's because of some of the things we just talked about on previous episodes. Look, Mack just wasn't going to work in Oakland if he was unsatisfied with the amount that they were willing to pay him. And the two sides just couldn't seem to get to the right number. And so you've got, Gruden there, you've got changes there. You don't want a guy, especially a stalwart on your defensive side, who's ultimately unsatisfied. If he's going to be paid like that, he's got to play like that. And so there was going to be some questions about whether you were going to get appropriate production out of a guy like Khalil Mack if he stayed in Oakland and wasn't satisfied. So I think they were at a breaking point in Oakland and they had to make a move. They made that move, and the price that Chicago paid, I thought, not in salary, but I'm talking about in picks, I was a little surprised at. Because Chicago now has kind of put themselves in a position where they're not going to be able to do a whole lot in the upcoming drafts, and we just talked about them having the benefit of what you just said with Goff and, a couple weeks ago with Trubisky, and having these rookie QB deals that aren't strapping them for cash. And then they go blow the bank on a defensive guy and take up a ton of that salary, not to mention giving up those picks. So I think Chicago